Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are in YouTube and you are, so you see a little link down below, you can actually click on that link and you'll end up in Zoom. And then you click on the little link down below and you end up in Mukana. And that's where you can ask questions and chat. And the best thing to do is to ask those questions early. You don't want to wait until the middle of the show. You want to ask them early, vote on them early. That way we know what the agenda is. This is an odd show where you're actually the producer. if you're watching this, you're producing this by asking the questions that we're going to discuss. And those things change every day, but that's the best part of this, is that it's all driven by you. Now, if you think you can answer the questions, come in a little early. We do our mic checks at 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we'd love to have you. If you're not sure if you're ready for that, come in a little earlier at 6 o'clock. At 6 a.m. we actually open the doors, and we'll just talk about all kinds of random things, unless you come in and say, "Hey, I want to do a check on my setup," and then we'll stop and we will tell you the truth. Not necessarily. Our job is to make you better, but not to make you happy. So you just have to know that you will get a good hard review of how you're set up, but you're more than welcome to it. It's how we all improve our situation as we deal with this. We start at 7 o'clock actually doing Q&A and general Q&A for the first hour. Second hour is something that we think is important. It's something that's moving our industry or technology that we're interested in. Today we're going to talk about what we call digital first events. These are events that really are designed for online that might still be viewed in person, but we're going to kind of talk through that a little bit in the second hour. Second hour tomorrow, we're going to talk about CDNs. What should we be using? Should we be using Vimeo or CloudFront or YouTube or Facebook? So we'll talk about all of those CDNs tomorrow. And then Saturday is a long day. So we have education. We're talking about the future of education in the second hour. Then and then after that, we're going to actually talk about, we're going to do 3 hours of working with our folks from the remotes. That's our little in-house band. And I know there's a longer name for it, but I'm just going to call them the remotes. So anyway, they're gonna talk about how they built their first song and how they did the video and how they did all the bits and pieces for hours. And because we did a second hour last week and it just wasn't enough. We were like, I need more information. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that on Saturday. If you want to actually share this with other people, we'd love to have it. The bigger we get, the more fun we'll have. So it's always a good thing to do. If you think that you know people that'd be interested, I put the link into Mukana. Feel free to use that. Don't use your own link. All right, Bill, let's go ahead and take it away.
Diving in, Ray Franklin of Mount Dora has our first question, the highest rated of today, and he asks, how does the group sell gear when they're upgrading? My ATEM Extreme is due tomorrow, so I have an ATEM Mini Pro to sell. Thank you.
I have to admit that I don't sell very much gear. It's like Hotel California for me. Goes in, doesn't go out. So everything checks in. I don't check a lot of things out. I think that for me, a lot of the stuff is that I end up reusing it. So I just use it somewhere else. Like they start off as the main thing and then they become glue, slowly over time, but they don't, I then oftentimes will end up giving it to schools or sending it to Africa, those types of things. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then Jan.
Yeah, I get a lot of products for review, so I don't pay for it to begin with. And the stuff I do pay for, I don't feel like selling it, because if somebody has a problem, I feel really bad on it. I will give away a product though to friends and family, somebody that absolutely needs it. And there's a lot of charities out there that can really use gear that we have for their live streams.
Go ahead, Jan.
Well, there's always eBay, Craigslist, but I think what Ray was talking about, because we were commenting on this, I think in the after hours show, that a lot of us are upgrading our equipment, and it's still excellent equipment, but we don't need it because it sits on a shelf. And so I think that's what Ray was talking about. And someone had mentioned in the room that you had an idea putting something into Discord. Now, I don't want to get thrown out of the panel, so I want to say, excuse me, I would like to make a proposal to you offline, and then if you appreciate it, you could share it with the group.
Okay, that sounds good. I'm probably one of the reasons that I'm hesitant to put something into our community around it is just that used gear is oftentimes a source of contention between people sometimes when it doesn't turn out. So it's just been one of those things that I've tried to keep away from an official thing, because I can see members buying it from other members internally, and and then have it not work, and then there's upset, and and it's just something that's why I'm avoiding it at the moment. Go ahead, Stuart.
Just let me finish this. I have made an amazing living doing selling used equipment for the last 24 years, but it's been high end,
Right.
sound and lights, a video. Anyway, I'll send you a proposal.
Okay, sounds good. All right, go ahead, Stuart.
Just a reminder, the verb is not hoarding; it is called collecting.
You're an archivist, Alex. You're an archivist.
It's gonna pay off, I think, because I'm actually going to when I persuade Fenwick to help me build my background here in his shop. I'm gonna I've been designing it, and I'm putting in all the stuff that I didn't sell that are what I consider classic, pieces of equipment. I want to put back there like my F950 and an Ozo and like things that are all
the Alex Lindsay Digital Museum of
those
audio video equipment.
And I'll collect a couple 840 AV. I don't have that yet, but I got to get one just to put, even if it's just the shell back there. That's like one of the most important Macs ever made.
Those are called artifacts.
I know. So I want to have a whole background of artifacts, back there. And so that are really cool. So that's my big plan. Anyway, next question.
Moving on, Doug Ferguson from the panel in Fort Wayne, Indiana says, when will Zoom webinars get breakout rooms?
Well, they've talked about it. So Zoom's already talked about the fact that they're going to put the breakout rooms in. So I think it'll be interesting to see. I actually like, what's funny is now that we were doing tests with breakout rooms, then we started doing the pre-show, the pre-show and the post-show with meetings. And I kind of like I like the shift between the two, but I think it will be good when we get breakout rooms into webinars. Go ahead, Doug.
The reason I ask is when we're putting on a big show with, let's say, 14 speakers, and we want to create like a green room to onboard those speakers before the webinar. I don't know if it's confusing enough to have them go into a separate meeting, like, here, use this thing first. And then once we check you in, now you go to the webinar. That might be confusing, but if webinars had the breakouts, I mean, game over. We just live in the same place. But what's your thoughts there?
Well, the way we do it, we can actually do both at the same time. So the speakers enter a meeting and then they end up in the webinar and they don't have to click on any new links, but that's because we're doing point-to-point connections. And so when they come into the meeting, they can be put into a green room and then put into their own little room, their own little breakout room. And then our rooms are their own breakout room. It's very complicated. And then our Zoom room attaches to that breakout room. And so that they don't actually have to move anywhere. If you're gonna do a more regular webinar where they're actually joining and being in the webinar directly, then you still need to send them an extra link, and that'll go away when you have breakout rooms. For us, it doesn't matter, but but for if you're actually using the webinar the way it was designed, you have to have them jump in. And we haven't found too much trouble with it. The main thing is not sending them both links at the same time. So don't send them the link to this is your green room, and then this is going to be the final room you're going to. You get them to the green room, and then you send them the link to the final room in chat, rather than that. And that's been the way that we've found to be the most effective. Next question.
Moving on, Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, California says, when doing virtual shows on a regular basis, is it better to do vMix and Zoom rooms in the cloud or stay with in-house hardware, ATEM switchers and computers, assuming there's enough in-house bandwidth to handle it?
I think it depends. I think that there's a lot of different ways to do it. I think that at some scale, you have to get into the cloud because you just can't manage the bandwidth at a location. So I think that I do think that there's the kind of the really complex audio chains I still haven't completely figured out the way we do it. So we keep it in hardware because we're doing a lot of other things with it. Oftentimes in a way that it would be difficult to do for us in the cloud. But I think that we're definitely experimenting with it a lot, and that's why we're kind of going through that in more detail starting the next couple of weeks. Stuart, and then Andy.
Simple way of doing it, and this ignores any of the security concerns or anything like that. Is the computer plus the vMix license cheaper or more expensive than the amount of bandwidth you'll pay for with AWS or the like? If the computer's cheaper and you've got budget limitations, go that way. If the spun up instance on AWS is going to be cheaper for you, especially as your project gets bigger, go that way.
Go ahead, Andy. You're muted.
I thought the thing about Zoom rooms was kind of interesting because I thought it was not possible to run Zoom rooms in the cloud. Is that something that's been solved?
It has a guy.
It wasn't until a few weeks ago I cracked the code and figured out how to put Zoom rooms in the cloud. Took a couple months, but it's working. And Andy's coming out with something even cooler.
Oh, yeah. So that'll. But yeah, it is. And what was the trick, guy? Are you able to talk about it?
I'm not going to tell right now. It took too long to figure out, and I'm going to give myself a little gap to get a few bus links on some people before I shared it with a few of us in the group. Tucker knows. Grant, if you have a good reason and you help in the community, I'd be glad to give that information, but I'm not going to give it on YouTube right now. It just it was a war to get it. I mean, I had to go through Azure and do all kinds of, get big bills over there. My AWS bill is huge, so I'm not really to just be like, oh yeah, here you go, silver platter.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. So contact Guy more directly in the community. Good. Next question.
Moving on to Jan Landy's question from Las Vegas, and then the panel starting to travel again. I need to have a second screen for my Mac. Suitcase space is a consideration. Has anyone used DeskLab Portable Touchscreen Monitors? Previously, when I traveled, I used my iPad as a second screen connected by either Duet or Luna Display, but the 12-inch was not enough screen size.
Go ahead, Sky.
I have it. I have yet to really exercise it. It's for the price is there are others out there. The touch screen function is not. I have not found the happy space of that. But again, for this thin of a monitor, and it does not have the what is that? The VST or the four things if you wanted to mount it.
Visa mount.
Yeah, the Visa mount. So it's got a little plastic stand that
the hard part we've had with a lot of those screens is that when you tap on them, they vibrate. So when they don't have a really heavy stand to them, when you tap on them, there's like this vibration and that goes on that drives us absolutely crazy.
And but it does have a lot of different mounts. I'm planning on using it more successfully with Luma Touch, as that editing software is physically touching the monitor to move your media around as an editorial system.
Yeah, go ahead,
Sky, did you get the 4K or the 1080p one?
Again, yes, I did get the 4K. I have yet to really exercise it, so I don't have that opinion. But yes, I do have the 4K.
Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then John.
So my understanding is that you can't do touch on a MacBook, but they're showing that they can. So is that special software on that?
It just shows up as a mouse input. It's not. Yeah, it's just for most of these touch screens. I mean, I've used a lot of touch screens with a Mac, and it just as long as it has a USB connection to it, it'll pass the positional information.
Which would then mean that some of these editing programs, you'd have to do something to get it to work properly in there, right?
No, you just touch it because it's just a mouse. For a Mac, it just looks like when you're touching on it, just looks like that's where I want my mouse to be. And so you'd still do it that way. It's just, there's not any special gestures or anything else. It just knows where the mouse is supposed to be. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, mileage varies. It does show up as a mouse, but there's a company called TouchBase, and they do a UPDD touch software that lets you use it as a mouse, but also do gestures. I've been using that with an Acer touchscreen. Just using the mouse was too flaky, but this software improves it.
Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
I don't need a touch screen. It doesn't have to be a touch screen because I'm just using it as a second screen.
So in 2014, I got one of those Asus HD displays, 15-inch displays, like for £110, $120, and it wasn't a touch screen, and it was good. You would use that for your other stuff of the UI that doesn't need to be high resolution. So in Final Cut, I actually had it vertical and had all my media listed and just had it next to my Mac. So the timeline was on my main screen, and the vertically next to it was just a vertical display that I could use with all my media in it, which actually worked quite well. So yeah, you can get these for $150 or something like that these days, and HD is fine.
Could you throw the link in the Mukana?
Will do.
Bill?
I use this guy. It's Kagoda is the company. It's worked out really well for me. It's USB-C. So with the 16-inch MacBook Pro plugs in directly. You do need to get the correct Thunderbolt 3 cable or USB-C, which is actually a Thunderbolt 3 cable. But once you get that sorted out, it's been just flawless and looks really good. I've been really surprised.
Next question.
Moving on to Rupert McRae of Dallas, Texas. And Rupert says, I have a Brio 4K webcam and would now like to go to get an ATEM Mini switcher. Would connecting the Brio to a small dedicated PC, maybe a B-Link, and monitoring the camera in full screen and then capturing an HDMI output from that PC into the ATEM be a reasonable workaround? Thanks, everyone.
I think you'll experience a lot of delay, because it's got to be converted and then going back out. So you're going to have to, your audio will be without delay in your audio. You could be as much as 4 to 5 frames off going through that at least. So that's the big problem with it. And if you try to put any other cameras directly into the ATEM, you'll definitely have a problem because that one will be way behind and the other ones will be right on. So that's the challenge with going through a PC with a webcam. Next question.
Moving on, Guy Cochran's up with, can we sing Tony's wife happy birthday? Are we that mad at her?
What do we have against poor Tony's wife?
Really?
That's the whole thing. I mean, you have to live through it. You have to live through it when you're here, but that's because you're on a panel. Tony, is your wife around?
Is your wife nearby? You can sing to her directly.
She's actually working not too far away from me. And she's a manager, so
okay,
it probably would be inappropriate for me to take it off my AirPods so that it might be kind of funny. If you guys want to do it, I will definitely.
What's your wife's name?
Kimberly.
Kimberly. We're happy to do it if you want to do it. We'll sing her happy birthday.
Okay, let me take the sound off my AirPods.
You let us know when you're ready.
Tony's now the floor manager.
And we all jump from behind the couch and
the new service, our new office hour service. We're just going to go around singing happy birthday to people in a horrible Zoom fashion. Like it's just like
we'll get 6 paid tempos, 3 keys.
We're going to have to pay people for that. They won't, not the other way.
We'll get paid not to do it.
Roscoe, you be the drum.
Excuse me for 1 minute.
Roscoe, be the drum major.
No, that's Alex's job.
Okay,
we all have to send some money to Paul McCartney, but
we don't even know if we sing it in 3/4 or 4/4. That's how bad we are.
In 3.
It doesn't matter.
I think it's in 3 too, but we've been doing it.
No, I tried to make it better, but I actually found that it was.
JJ's got it. Go.
Oh, okay. We got it.
All right, she's ready.
Oh, she's ready. Is it out?
Ready?
Okay. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you. Birthday, dear. Birthday to you. Happy
to you.
From London.
I hope we didn't embarrass you too much.
There we go. There's the train
I think
wreck.
that could be the worst one yet.
It is. It was. I think Scott got overexpressed and started going all over the place there.
Happy birthday from London. Bye bye.
Happy birthday, Kimberly.
Happy birthday, Kimberly.
Happy birthday.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. Our pleasure.
And we apologize.
Thanks for sharing Tony with us.
Not a problem. Nice surprise. Thank you.
All right. See ya. All right. Next question.
Alex 4D Golner from London, England. What do you think of the rumor that Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro for iPad will be announced by Apple at their Worldwide Developer Conference in the summer, and they'll be priced on a subscription basis?
I think that makes actually a lot more sense than that Final Cut on the desktop would go to any kind of subscription. But I think a subscription on iPad would totally make sense. I mean, they're trying to get, I think Apple wants to have larger developers putting bigger apps onto the platform. And so I think that doing it, fish fooding their own stuff makes sense, or dog fooding their own software makes sense to put it in a subscription. I'll be curious to see how much they charge. My guess is something like $4.99. Go ahead, Alex.
I think given the fact it costs $2.99 to buy Final Cut outright on the Mac, If it's the fully functional Final Cut, they should actually, to announce it WWDC means there actually is a message for developers, because usually they don't include Apple apps at WWDC because it's not very inspirational for other developers to go, well, great, the Final Cut person is now on stage. They actually want to see another developer like them on stage or in the video. So I think it may be quite high because I think Apple want the price point to be, say, look, $75 a year, $99 a year, $149 a year, just to say, look, you can invest couple of $1 million in development, and actually with some subscriptions, you'll be able to actually risk it.
I think there's also, I think the problem though is that I think the high subscription rates is not sustainable. So I think that you'll end up with more users and actually a better experience. Like I think that like Final Cut, for instance, at $4.99 a month on a $4.99 a month on an iPad would be devastating. Like it would just be, something that a lot of people were using. And I think that's the case for many things. I mean, I've talked to a lot of developers that develop for an iPad that are selling products at $2.99 and $4.99 and so on and so forth. And they are making a lot of money, like because the market, you're expanding the size of your market, and so while, I think developers have this thing, like they have to charge this really high number rather than making it. Cause the problem is it's, by charging a lot, like it's the reason that I'm actively trying to get rid of all my Adobe stuff, is that I just don't want to pay that anymore. And I don't want to pay it across the company. And so the issue is that, I still fall back and use Photoshop and fall back and use After Effects. Those are the only two really that I open up very much. Maybe Illustrator if there's some kind of weird file. So I have that suite because I need it, but we don't issue that to just about anybody else in the company. It's all Affinity design, a photo and everything else. And we're trying to move away from that because that subscription is too high. If all of the Adobe products were at $9.99, I wouldn't even think about it. Like I would just put it on every machine. And so the issue is that that's what Adobe's giving up, is they've created this huge market for other companies to come up under them because they're charging too much for their subscription. And so it's not the subscription that's the problem. It's the size. It's the cost of that subscription that's too much. And so, so I think that especially someone who, as people start looking at these subscriptions where, the companies are thinking about it from their own perspective of, I have to make X amount of money, but they don't realize that if they dropped it down, they'd end up with a much larger market and a much larger ecosystem and people that are growing into that process over time. So I think that the max Apple should charge for Final Cut, and I think the whole suite is probably $9.99. And I think that's the message I think Apple should send, is that you can actually do really well at a lower price point, expanding your ecosystem out rather than trying to just leverage the folks that are there. And I'm speaking as someone who made the mistake of not charging enough for some of my products. I was charging, conduit and so on and so forth wasn't enough. People didn't take it seriously. That's why it's important for Apple to charge that small amount, to say, hey, you can get really professional apps for not very much money. That takes away the stigma of not only charging a little bit of money for your app and then having more people actually use it. Go ahead, Roscoe.
You think Resolve has driven them a little bit towards this end of the market?
I don't think so. I mean, maybe some, but I think that I do think that Blackmagic has really found an incredible equilibrium of, you can do all this stuff for free and ongoingly, and then when you need it, you'll switch over to the pro version of it. And I think that's been genius.
And Apple has a much more robust, in my mind, support structure amongst their community than Resolve ever has. You ask for help from Resolve community, you're not necessarily going to get a direct answer. Whereas usually in that Apple community, you can find some pretty good answers.
Well, and that's the power of building a larger ecosystem. So that when you have the challenge is, like, for instance, is that it's much easier to find Premiere editors or Avid editors than it is to find Final Cut editors or Resolve editors. And so you want to, the software in 3D Studio Max and Maya, it's much easier to find people in that realm because that market was because of the pirated copies. So 10 years ago, there was so much piracy in those two apps that everybody had it, and so everybody learned it and everybody knew it because they were essentially giving it away for free, because they weren't really going after people with that there. And so I think that I think a lot of companies didn't learn the lesson from that having a huge ecosystem is super important, because it means companies know that they can depend on it. Like for me, even, I mean, I definitely hire Final Cut editors, and Resolve editors, but it's a lift. Like it's a lift for me to find them, and that's the real challenge. And that's what Apple has to get over. And I think a lot of companies, you get a lot of market force when you have a lot of people using your software. Next question.
Oh, okay. Andy Dolph, Durham, New Hampshire says, what is the plugin that Alex Golner developed that everyone was talking about during the pre-show? Where is it available? Sorry, mistyping your name, Alex. Grow Shrink.
Yes, it's if you go to alex4d.com/free1, that's a link to my first batch of free plugins. I think there's 60 there. And then the first couple of paragraphs, it's one called Alex4D Grow Shrink. And it's an effect where you drop it onto a clip in Final Cut Pro, it slowly scales it up by about 5% over time, however long the duration of the clip is. And if you add a transition, it includes that transition in that. And also you can choose the center point of the scaling up, so you can focus it up and scale it up around an area of interest. I'll post the link in Mukana.
Next question.
JJ McKenna, Santa Venetia says, what is your preferred choice for local NAS storage, network attached storage, with RAID for video editing?
I use Direct, mostly because my files are too big to do a NAS, in my opinion. Stuart?
This is one that Jason has answered several times, and he does have a brand that he says not to buy. So maybe the question would be better asked on a night when he's in.
The NASs that we've used in the past, we didn't need that heavy of a performance, has been Synology's, are stuff that we've been pretty happy with. I mostly use direct attached, for a given machine. I don't like a lot of things sharing. I don't like them. I don't like them sharing. I like moving things around. Mickey?
And definitely for lighter loads, as Alex mentioned, Synology. But if you have to do connectivity that total throughput that goes above 10 gigabits, I would build my own server.
Go ahead, JJ.
Synology has that kind of the build your own NAS format. So is there a particular one that you guys would choose? Would it be storage versus performance with the video storage that they have? And then part of that too would be, which drives then would you fill those with? Because they have the various colors, green, red, black.
I usually am just focused on 7,200 RPM, or 10,000 RPM. Those are the two. Like, I don't look at the colors. I look at the speed of the drive, because the other ones are, I haven't found a huge performance difference. There is some reliability differences or longevity differences with some of them. But the ones you want to avoid are the 5,400 RPM are trash. Stuart?
Just on drives and what have you, the 10,000 RPM drives aren't worth the money compared to getting a decent SSD. There are Seagate drives that actually have an SSD built into the regular hard drive, so it caches the routinely or the most commonly used data, so that it delivers that faster. There are also, actually just sticking with the Seagates, I think they're the red ones. They're actually made for security PVRs and what have you, for when you're recording all the cameras on location and you need to have a secure backup. They're supposed to be Seagate's most reliable drives.
Go ahead, Andy.
I wanted to ask JJ, why NAS? Why not just get like a 2 terabyte SSD or something like that to put the project that you're working on, and then have some other sort of longer term storage that doesn't have to be fast?
My question is based off of if you're workshopping with other people inside of a studio where you have multiple folks who need to do various portions of the project work, and you'll see, I asked later questions, since Frame.io is kind of replacing that for a lot of the folks here, how do you then couple that with Frame.io? I know this is brand new, at least the Frame.io's availability, but then making that so that it becomes a local copy if the internet fails out. How do you synchronize that with the storage? Because Frame.io doesn't really have like synchronization tools built into it that I've seen. But then again, I'm a PC guy.
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, in terms of the actual drives themselves, if you're running a RAID with 8 drives or less, I would feel confident enough, like if I have at least 2 what do you call this, parity drives to run like the consumer grade Seagate Barracudas. But if you are going to run more than 8 drives on the same rack, I would tend to lean toward something more of the enterprise grade, like the Western Digital Golds or the enterprise grade Seagates, because they're rated to handle a lot of vibration from other drives in the rack.
That's great. All right, we're going to move a little bit faster now because we have our audience got really effective at asking questions. So next question.
Nick Barnes in St. Louis, I believe. What are your favorite HDMI or SDI capture devices in the sub $100 range? I've seen the $15 units on Amazon, but that scares me.
I think, yeah, go ahead, Guy, and then Stuart.
Yeah, I really still like the rock solid AJA stuff, the UTAPs, but during the height of the pandemic, everybody was out of them. So I actually got some and started my own brand called Riser. And so I'm using one and have been for the last like 7 months. A couple of people, Chris Comfort, have them as well. Jeff Widgren, they're $99 and they actually will pass through 4K as well. So the cool thing is you can not just like this $99 or $79 Adamus Connect, which works well, but it doesn't have the through out. So if you ever need an out, it's nice to have, especially since this one will do 4K back out, but then bring in 1080p to zoom. So
and that's your own brand?
So, yeah, Riser capture card on DVD.
And it's a capture card or a capture like device?
It's a USB capture device. Yeah.
Oh,
Would you post a link to that in Mukana?
Yeah, please post a link. Yep. Go ahead, Stuart, and then Roscoe.
Yeah, just a note on the Amazon listings for those, because seeing the price that was said and then SDI, it's sort of, that doesn't sound right. But what you look at is there's several deals of that somebody's listed and it's like a really cheap price, and then have a look and it's got like 1 left or 2 left, and the same advertiser has got another ad right next to it with a price that is much, much higher, closer to what you'd get for a Blackmagic device. So I would expect the cheap ones, a little bit of bait and switch for the SDI, or you'll be paying a large amount in shipping compared to what you would normally pay.
Good, Roscoe.
Yeah, Blackmagic Mini Recorder has been buying them for years. Thunderbolt 2, Thunderbolt 3, now they come in, and they just are rock solid. So I have no complaints. And for a while, they didn't work directly into Zoom, but something got fixed and they do again. So they're good.
That's great. Next question.
Chris Widener of Lafayette, Indiana says everyone prefers hardware, but did anyone look at the new update from Wirecast? SRT output and backchannel rendezvous chat looks interesting. Any thoughts?
All I can say is that the rendezvous thing in Wirecast has been kind of a train wreck every time someone shows it to me. So I don't know if it's gotten better. I can tell you that every single time someone's called me with rendezvous to test it, it's been a disaster. So I don't know if Jeffrey has any updates or anything else, but I didn't find it to be usable. No
updates
Jeffrey's
it's,
Jeffrey's staying away from that.
I stay away from all most web-based input type devices. So yeah.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I decided to test it because I don't have any SRT hardware since Doug got it from me, my Clearcaster, but I wanted to put SRT up to vMix in the cloud. So I let it bake in and it ran fine. I was doing some tests versus the Elemental. In fact, I put them side by side. I put the Elemental link and the SRT out of Wirecast from the PC side by side. And the SRT was a little faster by about 2 seconds, but it was going up to AWS, then over to mine. So it went up 6C or whatever that transport is, and then over RTMP, and then I pushed it over to live stream actually. So it was a cool test to see it all working. But as long as Wirecast is a one-trick pony, like if you just have it do like 1 or 2 things, it works great. But the minute that you start saying, I want it to do this and graphics and bring in my titles from Twitter, and it gets
or I would like to plug in my headphones while my show's running. That's completely like it just. Anyway, sorry, not that I'm bitter. Next question.
Ken Jordan of Epsom in the UK says, is it possible to replace Guy's scope output to Zoom from the Blackmagic Video Assist 12G HDR? think I said replace, and it's actually replicate. Is it possible to replicate Guy's scope output?
I don't think it pushes the out of the scopes over the HDMI.
But I think if you're just trying to get what it does, I think most of those scopes are there in the 12G. Well, the new 12G has scopes in them. I mean, the ones that it has the ones we really care about, like it should have Luma, RGB Parade, Vector. Those are all there. I believe all these scopes are there. I don't think you can put them all in a 4x like that, but I think you definitely can go through them and look at them. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, he mentions so that he wants to output it to Zoom like what the guy is doing.
Oh yeah, it doesn't do that. Like it doesn't output. There's no way to get the scopes out of the monitor. It just does it in the monitor. So you can definitely look at it in the monitor, but I don't think it outputs. Blackmagic, I believe, has another product that does that though. It will. What is that? What is the
Deck does it? The HyperDeck 8K does it.
The HyperDeck 8K does the outputs.
The Deck does it. Yeah, it definitely does. It's awesome.
But didn't they have a little? They had like a little input device that was for a PC that would do
pocket scopes. I don't know where that went. I'm not sure that's still a product or not.
Yeah.
It was a product like 10 years ago.
Well, I was like, this is great, and like a huge part of Blackmagic's market is Mac, and we don't understand why that was done that way. You know, like because that would have been something we would have bought bushels of, you know, to do what we do. Mickey.
Yeah, I think the pocket scope thing was out during the time of the original cinema camera. But
right.
I guess one workaround you could possibly do is get the picture into Resolve Live. Use the scopes there and screen scrape those with OBS or something.
Well, and again, are you using Scopebox, Guy?
Yeah, this is Scopebox right here. It just sits behind me. So this is a 4-up. I don't know if that's going to work, Mickey. Are you actually spotlighting it or no? Yeah. So if you spotlight it, or no, it'll see itself and it'll freak out.
Yeah.
Is it freaking out?
It's not freaking out, but it's
okay.
Ish.
Yeah. Ish. Yeah, because it goes by active speaker. So if it becomes the active speaker, it might see itself and go into that infinity mode. But yeah, it's just basically a quad up. It's running on an old Mac 2013, and you can see that you can choose waveform, vector scope, RGB Parade.
And we've used Scopebox a lot. It works really well. So it's because it's just as an SDI signal, it's just coming in as SDI. It's just as accurate as anything else we've used. The resolution on the AJA color analyzer is way higher, and it gives you a lot more control, but Scopebox is a lot less expensive. Next question.
Alton Christensen of Brooklyn says, what issues, if any, would there be shooting talent using a ProMist filter in a green screen situation? How much does it complicate pulling a key?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Okay, the ProMist filter works by knocking off all the high frequency detail. So things like the lines under your eyes and small pieces of hair and what have you all disappear, they soften out. That's going to affect what sort of detail you get around the edge of a person as well. And that might mean that the key is soft, or if you're using a key fill, the mask will actually be a little soft as well. But you should be able to adjust that in your mixer.
I have a feeling that it would look a lot like if you did a ProMist filter on a green screen, it would look a lot like everybody's virtual backgrounds that they do on Zoom.
Probably.
You know, the soft edges and everything else. I would highly recommend against using ProMist filters for a green screen shoot, Guy.
Yeah, there's actually different strengths. So a quarter would be fine. A quarter is very slight and barely noticeable, but makes people look really, really great if they have like a newscaster type with the older, 50s. Here I go. I shouldn't go down this path.
I guess
it just helps soften wrinkles.
I guess the thing that I would say is that there is software that does it extremely well. Like if you're going to already take it into post, I mean, using ProMist makes sense if you're going live and you're just doing your thing. If you're going to go through post and you're going to do stuff, there is incredible tools to soften out people's face that run sometimes in real time, but definitely in post. If you're pulling green screens, they can already do that for you. I'd much rather do it in post and get a good key than add another layer of complexity to something that's already difficult to do well. Green screen to do really, really well is hard. To do it average is easy. I mean, everybody can do that, but to do it really well and have it really look great is hard. And adding another variable makes it just harder. Next question.
JJ McKenna from Santa Venetia says, is there a way to transfer files from one Frame.io account to another Frame.io account without downloading?
Yeah, go ahead, Nikki. I can't hear you.
I looked this up earlier, and on Frame.io's website they have an article called "Copying Media Within Your Account," and they have a question at the bottom called "Can I copy to a different account?" I have access to it, and it says, "For security reasons, copying assets and folders is not supported between accounts."
Go ahead, JJ, real quick.
Actually, I did it yesterday. Just reach out to their, if you're in both accounts, just chat at them and they'll do it in the back end.
There you go. Next question.
Charles Klein in New York City says video files have metadata tags for color primaries, transfer functions, and color matrix. Do audio files have similar encoding and decoding attributes attached as metadata?
The drop frame versus, drop frame, non-drop, that kind of thing is all technically metadata. I mean, it's stuff that can be reordered in stuff like, what is the Sound Devices software? Mickey?
Wave Agent.
Wave Agent will show you a lot of stuff that is not the audio file, but is all the other information that's related to the audio file. So Wave Agent lets you, change the way tracks are organized, change the way a lot of other things are done. It's not. I don't think it runs on the newest OS, but it lets you do a lot of that work, and that is basically manipulating the metadata. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, broadcast wave files, which is a version of wave files with an IXML file built in. It's capable of carrying track names, scene numbers, take numbers, and even down to production information, like production companies, directors, and stuff like that. On top of course, time code.
Next question.
Jan Landy of Las Vegas here on the panel says, looking for a credit card that can create a unique number for every transaction. It would be good to have a one-time use card a la privacy.com. So if I sign up for a subscription that I only want for a one-time use, I don't have to cancel it. The card will just expire.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, Revolut do that. I think you can have up to about 6 virtual cards. And so, but if any one of them, you want to cancel, and then they will regenerate another one. But Revolut is really good for that.
That's great. Mickey, and then Jeffrey.
A lot of banks offer this service built into their apps, so you might want to check with your bank if they offer it.
Okay, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Banks and credit cards. There was one time I was traveling across seas, and I called them up. They said we can create a one-time card for a purchase. Did that, and you just got to call them.
I think that the Apple Card lets you change it. You can just change it as often as you want. It's because it doesn't really have a number in the traditional sense. It's not printed on the card. Go ahead, Jan.
Yeah, if you're not familiar with privacy.com, the privacy, you create credit cards per use, but it takes the money directly out of your bank account. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to have a step in between that as protection.
Right. Makes sense. Next question.
David Brady in New York says, using Zoom and or Facebook API encoder only and or Facebook's API encoder only outputs 720 versus 1080 using hardware encoders such as the Matrox HDX or ATEM Pro's built-in encoder. Is there a way around this, or is there a limit to the method?
The Zoom Direct is 720 to everything right now, so it doesn't go higher than 720 that I've seen. So it's actually one of the reasons we're working on improving that. So we'll but I think that is a limitation right now. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, the way around it is to screen scrape it as an attendee and then push it via vMix via the API, not RTMP, or else it'll wind up 720 again if you're going to Facebook. So there's only 2 methods. That's vMix via the API or the Wowza Clearcaster. So if you want 1080, and it does look gorgeous. I mean, it definitely stands out in the feed when you see how sharp.
When you're doing the participant, is there any graphics? Do you have to scale it up a little bit to get rid of any graphics around folks?
No, it's all gone on as long as you have a dual display and you can drag. There's there was something that was on the screen that you can drag off, and then you got to pop out chat and take chat off too, so that doesn't, and then it's clean.
That's great. Next question.
Mark Harder of the Bedford-Stuyvesant area of Brooklyn says, Guy Cochran, is that a box with an ATEM Mini Extreme sitting behind you open? And if so, have you pushed the wrong button on it yet?
I don't know. Maybe it is. Let's see. It is an ATEM Extreme. Yeah, the buttons are super tiny, but the unit itself is actually much bigger than, let me unplug some of the HDMIs. So here's just to show you physically how big this one is versus the Mini. I mean, it's so much bigger. It's like a full-size keyboard. But yeah, the buttons are still tiny, and I found myself trying to, in the dark when I didn't have this bright light on, trying to read some of the buttons because they are pretty jam-packed in there. But yeah, it's amazing, the super source, and the fact that it's bigger dissipates the heat. So I'm really impressed with just the stability of it. Whereas the old one, I felt like it would heat up, and I would get these black screens every once in a while. And so we started using these stands to try and prop them up. But this one's been on for 2 days now, and it's just been perfect.
Is there a downstream key button like on and off?
Yeah,
on
there's two. There's one downstream key, and it's off and on, and then there's 4 upstream keys.
Right, but you have the buttons on the outside that you can actually get to it, because that's not something that has been. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. All right. Yeah, I'm excited to get my hands on one. Next question.
Tom Wineland in San Francisco says, thoughts on using Clubhouse office hours last night. What would you like to see in terms of improvements and so forth?
I mean, I think that being able to raise your hand in Clubhouse as a panelist would be useful. Like right now we have this weird thing where people turn it on, they turn their mute on and off. It's just stupid. Like, it's like, it's something that is so obvious that you need, and to make it some kind of weird little code. I guess everyone's trying to do kind of the speakeasy thing where you have to know how to use it, or there's a secret way of managing it, but it's just at the scale that it's running at now with 5,000 people listening to a Clubhouse, you should have more tools that actually make that work. I mean, that's kind of unexcusable at this point. It was fine when they were experimenting with it, but they really need to grow up at this point. They're in that moment where if Clubhouse doesn't grow up, someone else, everyone's gunning for them. And so they're in that moment where they've got everybody excited. This is where these kinds of things die, is that they get everybody's attention, and then they don't grow fast enough to keep up with the Zooms, the Facebooks, the Instagrams, everybody is gunning for them with lots of engineering staff, and, they're moving too slowly, so I think that I'm not saying anything's bad, that Clubhouse is going away, but they're on the bubble. Like, they'll either make it or they won't in another couple months, because if they don't start adding the features that are necessary, people are just going to go buy them. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, and as soon as you unmute the mic just for coming up on the stage, that just drives me nuts. So many people are invited to the stage and then add noise. All they're adding is noise.
Yeah, and it's not, again, it's just not scalable. Like, it's not like you're having people don't visualize it. Like, we think about it a lot here, that right now there's probably 225, 250 people watching us. And so we kind of want to be careful we want to be conscious of that, that we're standing, and that's only 250 people. They're having 5,000 people there, and they have all these audio weirdness and all the other things that are there. And they're all, they're not really thinking about that impact, and again, it wouldn't take very much for Clubhouse to organize it. I wouldn't even run Clubhouse if I didn't have Mukana. Like, if I didn't have something that people could ask questions and organize those and everything else, I wouldn't even bother. Like, it would just be, because what am I going to do? Bring every person up to ask a question? That's, it just doesn't make for a good radio show. It's because you don't have the producer role. Like, when you listen to a radio show, there's a producer that talks to that person before they come on. And a lot of them just don't make it to the show because they don't have good audio. They don't have a good, they're crazy. There's all these things that they try to get through before you put them on stage, and Clubhouse doesn't have any of those things to do that. And I'm sure that they have some methodology or some reason for it, but I don't think that it's valid. Next question.
Mike Keeping of Burlington, Ontario, says, I read about Apple discontinuing Rosetta on M1 in some countries in upcoming updates. Thoughts on that?
I don't think they're going to discontinue anytime soon. I mean, I'd be surprised. Maybe I could be wrong, but they're in the beginning of a transition. I don't know why they'd make it more complicated. Next question.
Eugene Palmer of Berkeley, California. Sync is the topic. Last night on a 4-hour Zoom, rehearsal sync was okay at 7 p.m., but by 9:30 p.m., many participants were out of sync, including myself with the 700 by 700 connection. Recently, Andy from Zoom OSC was significantly out of sync. What are the pain points for Zoom Sync and for Zoom OBS Sync?
I don't know what is causing it to slide. Mickey?
Yeah, just in case, Eugene, you're running OBS on a Mac. The Mac version of OBS isn't very efficient, and if it runs out of cycles, things start to slip after a while, especially when your CPU starts to heat soak.
Next question.
JJ McKenna, Santa Venicio Lower School, says, in consideration of Jan Landy's query about daily scheduling, for people with iOS devices, how does one prevent multiple events in a calendar when using a Google Workspace account? Note, this is nothing that some folks have multiple work calendars that they use on their phones or computers.
Scheduling over email. Scheduling over email, like you know, and agreeing to it, not having people shove meetings into your schedule. I don't know of any other way to do it. If you're in a company and you have you can have people see it. Like I'm on an Exchange server within our company, and so people can see when I'm blocked out. But if I have other calendars, like right now, Exchange and iCal isn't working really well, so it gets complicated going back and forth. And so, but there's, you know, I'm constantly looking at my schedule, and then if someone puts something somewhere where something's already there, I just have to tell them. I decline. Tell them why I can't go there because I already had something there. But when people do auto scheduling, which is something that kind of annoys me, is, you know, like I feel like there's an etiquette to this, which is, hey, when can we meet? And you agree to when you can meet rather than people shoving things into your schedule. When people shove something in my schedule, I usually just go decline. Like I didn't agree to that. So unless they're a really big client. Then I say, okay, and I move everything else around. But outside of that, I will decline almost everything that gets put into my calendar that I didn't have an explicit agreement to. But it's because I have like 12 calendars that I'm managing, and I can't have them just stick stuff in. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I don't think there's any automatic way to do it because people can't see your side of the puzzle. Next question.
Tony Mobley, I think, has tongue firmly in cheek in Newman, Georgia, saying, is there any conversation about selling Mukana to Clubhouse? In my opinion, they need it or something close to it.
No. We have our own plans for Mukana. Next question.
Donna Shanklin of Moulton, not sure where that is. Storage of microphones. Have a Rode Video Mic MEL and a Shure 88 mic. Do I store them with silica packets? How often do I replace, if so, the silica packets? I'm sure you don't want to replace the mics very often.
Go ahead, Roscoe, and then Nikki.
You can bake silica packets to drive the evaporation or drive the moisture back out of them. So you don't necessarily need to replace them. You just need to bake them once in a while.
Go ahead, Mickey.
I typically replace the silica packets and that I store in the padded leatherette pouch that a lot of these mics come in. I replace them as soon as the packs go missing, which is about every 2-3 months. And you can buy a pack of 100 pieces of silica packs I got this, I think, for an equivalent of $1.50. So just buy them, replace them as often as you want.
Next question.
Johnny Estias in Manila says, for our Saturday mix in AWS session, do individuals creating a new account need to submit a ticket to increase the vCPU limit? I only ask because AWS sometimes takes a couple of days to complete such tickets.
Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I didn't have any problems because I have an older account, but I did watch a tutorial, which I just pasted in Mukana, where a gentleman said, yeah, you definitely need to do that ahead of time. So if those of you that want to follow along, we should probably put something somewhere to let people know that they want to get their account going and make sure that they can at least get one instance, because they can be days away from being able to actually actively fire one up. So because I don't know if there's a limited amount, but I kind of hoarded some, and I know some other people hoarded some. So I think Johnny's asking because I requested 96 yesterday and they granted them to me. So I got a bunch of them, but that's for a special project.
That's funny. Go ahead, Andy.
So what is this about vMix on AWS on Saturday? Is it an open thing?
What are we doing
It's
on
gonna be
Saturday?
a Friday next Friday.
Next Friday.
Yeah,
not Saturday.
Saturday.
Yeah. So on a week from Friday, we are going to start possibly a 2 or 3 part series of installing vMix and Zoom into the cloud, within, for our second hours. I feel like we keep on talking about it. We've talked around it. We've done a lot of those things, but we just haven't, we just need to walk everybody through it. So everyone just needs to build their, set up an AWS account, and we're all going to do it very slowly. And we may not have as many people watching. We're just going to do it so that there's a whole bunch of us that have built instances in the cloud. And then again, the, kind of the concept I have a lot of times about office hours, about the group, is that if we can get, this gets into that ecosystem, if we can get 50 or 100 people who have done it, then it means every person after that asks questions. It's not just Guy and 1F Jeff and Tucker and other folks. There's 50 or 100 people. And then as we all start experimenting with it, we come up with new solutions, and we all learn faster because we're all now over that hump. It's just getting everyone over that little speed bump. So a week from Friday, we'll start doing that. That's the plan.
And how many vCPUs should we ask for?
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk through that, but go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, last night in the Clubhouse post show, I can't believe we were actually doing these kind of things now that they're going this late, but we wound up staying till like 10 o'clock last night. Grant, the discussion got into this, and I reminded him about Livestream Studio because Keenan was in there, and we're like, where's the StreamYard to vMix? Because there's somewhere in between there. And so I said, what about Livestream Studio? I fired it up in the cloud, and it's the same process. So for those of you that are kind of like, I don't want to mess with vMix, doesn't run on the Mac, Livestream Studio does. And again, it's like Wirecast, as long as you're only having it do a couple things, it works incredibly well. And one of the things that it has is a web browser where you can pass that program, preview, cut audio mixers in a web browser to somebody at the far end to cut your show. So it's amazing. Like Grant just messaged me just a few minutes ago going, I got it installed. And if Grant's blown away, you guys are going to be like, what? Like, because in vMix, when you give somebody a web portal, you only see just text and boxes. You don't see program and preview. So how do they know what shot to go to? So if you're cutting a show remotely, you'd have to give a multi-view through like Zoom or OBS Ninja or something like that. So Livestream Studio, I think those guys need to wake up and embrace what they have, because it's a gold mine if they can get it. Everybody excited about it. I'm excited about it. I'm really excited. It's like $99 a month or something like that, and when it's working well.
The problem I've had with Livestream Studio is we're in the middle of a show and suddenly we lose control. Like it is a little bit of spaghetti code there. So it when it works, you're like, this is the future. And then when it breaks, you're like, I'm never using this again. So that's the scary part of that software, is that it's not production grade. It's really cool, but that's the scary part of Livestream Studio. I think that vMix is a lot more robust as far as I trust that it's actually going to work. Next question.
Henry Ramos of Yonkers, New York asks us to do a little thought experiment here. You're asked to shoot and live stream the original Beatles appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show. Who is your dream production crew?
Go ahead, Roscoe, and then
I'd shoot on film. I'd get the best cinematographers I could get my hands on.
Go ahead, Stuart.
I'd get Alex to produce, Sky to be floor manager, Mickey to be audio. We'd select cameras at random, and I would direct.
Go ahead, Chris.
I would hire Hamish Hamilton and do whatever he told me to do. Live director. He's the one, we've talked about him before.
Right.
He's done U2. He has the perfect mix of detail, emotion, and grandeur. Even putting it on a screen. The best example right now is 2015 U2 in Paris. Buy it on. I tell you what. Buy it on iTunes. If you're on the panel, buy it on. I'm taking a screen grab. Buy it on iTunes. Watch it. If you don't like it, I will send you money to pay for it. Only the people on this panel right here. It's amazing.
I think that so Nate would be probably one of my. It would either be Nate or Marcia Kapustin would be the two TDs that I would probably lean towards. Nate, of course, you've seen Nate talk here before. Marcia cuts for Paul McCartney and Metallica, and I've sat downstream from her cuts, and we walked in, so we did the very first live stream at the YouTube studio in LA in Playa Vista. They'd had it for a year, but no one had actually done a live stream. So we had finished a show with John Mayer the day before at another studio, and so I had all my people down there, and I was like, hey, let's go do a thing. So she calls somebody, and some Grammy winner shows up, and we put him in a studio, and she just starts calling cameras with, and it just was a work of art. Like without any rehearsal, anything else. She just, because it's all she does is concerts, or it's all she did for a long time. And so, I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of concerts. And so, and it's so much fun to listen to her yell at camera operators, when you're on comms with her. Go ahead, Jan, real quick.
Ken Ehrlich, I would try to get Ken Ehrlich out of retirement, but he was amazing.
Yep. Next question.
Peter Moore, Auckland, New Zealand is in with, for those of us who are coders or scripters, tabs or spaces? And he puts a note, insert Silicon Valley show reference. Oh, and I preferred tabs, by the way.
Tabs. Next question.
Moving on to Lock Lopez Waterman, our friend from New York, says, a question for those that were here when the office hours, when the 1080p bump happened. Was there any of the office hours population that had trouble because of the bump? I ask because I wonder if with less technical participants, would it be a bad move to have higher res meetings? Bandwidth and or CPU crunch for some? Are there issues?
I mean, it definitely crunches. I mean, 1080p isn't as stable for a lot of people than 720. Go ahead, Roscoe.
I was going to say only if they're on Chromebooks. I suffered no issues whatsoever, and I use a fairly old Mac. But yeah, I don't think there's very many issues. I wouldn't avoid it.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
If you're talking meetings, then 1080p might be overkill, especially if you can screen share and get a 1080p showing what your desktop stuff is. If you're doing some sort of show and tell, maybe 1080p works at that point. But for the most part, I wouldn't even mess with even 720p at that point.
Go ahead, Stuart.
I don't know if I'd call this an issue or not, but it would show up a greater level of difference between the sort of work that we're encouraging and getting to ourselves compared to people who, shall we say, are lackadaisical about having a good appearance on their online content. So they would look even worse compared to those who are putting the effort in. So it might just widen the gap there a little bit.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, the main reason we wanted 1080p here was so that you could show screens with a switcher. So that's for us, it's being able to share a screen with, regardless of the quality of people's video or anything else. It was that I want to be able to share a screen. I don't want to use screen share because I find screen share to be, I hate the way it changes state. So we're trying to get to a point that was the big reason. And I think that that could be a valid thing, even in meetings, that you have a lot more people having, let's say, ATEM Minis. I think that for salespeople, for people doing regular presentations, even executives, like an ATEM Mini Pro or ATEM Mini, it should be almost standard on their desks so that they can just jump between their keynote and themselves, and they can, it's a little bit more technical as far as the dance goes, but you can't do that when you have a webinar that is at low resolution. Go ahead, Andy.
Just on that concept, Zoom OSC took away really all of my pain with screen share. I'm completely happy using it because I can get in and out of it really fast. And at least for me, it's easier than
it is for personal, but like when you're thinking about doing it for a whole bunch of people, when you're thinking about doing it for a large group or whatever, then you can't assume that people are going to have that capability on their end, and that's the challenge.
Well, that's fair.
Yep, next question.
Moving to TJ Asher, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the panel often when trying to bring in the WLM meters into my Teams meeting, and Teams does not appear to see the OBS virtual camera. Any insights on Teams and virtual cameras? And he notes he's running on a Mac and OBS virtual camera works great with Zoom. It's how Mickey brings the meters in here that he's interested in.
Real quick, Mickey, we're running a little over, so we just have to answer it quickly.
Oh, yeah, I'm not familiar with Teams, so I don't know what the issue would be. But maybe you might want to try running NDI virtual camera out of OBS and see if that might work with Teams.
Next question.
Robert Laney
Running
of
out of time.
Las Vegas says, are all the panelists independents and available for contract gigs? I'm a producer, and is there a contact list or database of the panelists that includes their specialties?
We're working on Discord doesn't really have a great place for this, so we're working on another way to do that. But right now, it's it's the I need help area. We should probably put something more formal in Discord that people can post, like I'm looking for these people. But we don't have a kind of a list because Discord doesn't have a way to do that really effectively right now. And so as the new site comes up, then there'll be a very skeletal site coming up very soon, next couple of days. And then after that, we'll keep building it out. And one of the things I want to do is do profiles of folks so that people can just put their little profile in, and makes it a little bit more easier to organize. Next question.
Tom Schofield of Medford, Massachusetts says, anyone know if there's a way to change the gray background color in Zoom when in gallery view? I guess it's gray. I thought it was black. Oh, well.
I don't think that there's any way to adjust that. That's something that's kind of lives inside of the app. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer, Melbourne, Florida. When will Zoom allow for camera ISOs to be selected and sent to vMix?
Go ahead, Andy.
I don't know that Zoom ever will, but Andy Carluccio from Liminal demonstrated the preliminary version of Zoom ISO that's going to be coming out pretty quickly, it sounded like, at least in beta, and seems like it's going to do it brilliantly, because the issue he brought up, which I hadn't thought about, is if you've got a panel, say this size, you don't want a 1080p ISO of everybody all the time, because you'd need a 100 gig network to deal with it. So what he's doing is a way of dynamically allocating low resolution thumbnails for the multi-viewer. And then when you put it in preview, it goes to 1080p and it stays 1080p until you're done with it. So pretty cool.
Yeah. I don't think we establish that you're getting 1080p ISO as well, audio ISO as well as video ISO. Is he doing both with that?
Audio, what he said is
I think audio is muxed in the at the reflector, not on the host.
He said that Zoom has to turn on raw data, that if Zoom turns on raw data licensing again, then he can have audio ISOs very quickly. For now, it's muxed.
Right. Okay. All right. We've gotten to the bottom of the hour, a little heavy. Sorry about that. But now we're going to shift gears to talking about digital first events. And I think that it was actually, what was interesting is that one of the first places that I saw that as a term was something that Maggie, actually, who's on our panel today, mentioned. And I was like, oh, that's a perfect word for this. Like it is like because I've been talking about virtual first events and virtual primary events and trying to find the right term for that when you talk to clients about it. And Maggie, I don't know where Maggie picked it up, but it was, or she made it up or created it, but it was the first time I had seen it. And so I was really excited when she said she was going to come on, because I was like, I stole it from her. So anyway, so I wanted to give proper reference. So it's been really effective as far as thinking about it that way. And go ahead and as we get started, people are more than welcome. The panelists are more than welcome to raise your hand and just give your 2 cents about this. But I think that one of the things that we're, to kind of define what we're talking about is really, right now, let's see if this works. Right now you have, you think of a room, and you think of your speaker and everyone in the room, and you end up with all these cameras in the back. And that is always going to be, no matter what you do, you're always going to be behind, when you do that. You're always going to be, it means that everybody out here, the viewer that's watching at home, even over other breakout rooms, when they get that feed, they are always going to feel like they are in what I call the kiddie table. They're not really in the room. They're not there. And so the thing that we've been talking to a lot of folks about, and the thing that I felt like Maggie gave a name to, is the idea that we build a studio where our hosts are going to be, and then wherever you have people watching, that can be in 2 different continents, or we have individuals that are watching at home, watching their TV, all of them are on the same playing field. So that's what we're starting to refer to as a digital first event, or the way I'm referring to it as a digital first event, is that you are building it out to be be replicatable and modular in that area. And when you think about it, for those of us who've worked on big events, there's somewhere between 300 and 500 people where everyone's just looking at the screen. Like, they're not looking at the stage anymore. They think that they want that person to be in the room because they're used to it, but they're not actually, paying attention to that. They're just looking at the screen because that's where the presentation is. That's where the IMAG, what we call the IMAG, the person up there is. And so it's a very small step to get rid of that. And the thing that I think about a lot is, we think about, this little studio and it's going out to conference rooms and everything else. But what about all of those movie theaters that don't have a stage? You have thousands of screens that are never going to get used again. And we have the opportunity to reuse those as endpoints for, giant virtual events. And I believe that now you have great audio quality, you have better use of cameras. It's easier to bring in remote participants. It's easier to do a lot of other things and make the production much, much, much tighter than anything you can do on a stage. And this is as someone who's worked on stages for decades. You can't compete with a studio when someone starts to move fast in that area. And now you can now replicate it instantly to many, 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 many locations without much effort. Maggie, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. I think for us, when we talk about digital, I'm an event planner. So that's why I wasn't here for the first hour, because I was like, what you guys do is incredible and more than what I can do. But my mic is, I'll fix it after I'm done talking. But anyway, when we think digital first, the reason we say digital and not virtual is because when people think virtual events, they just think Zoom, and we're transferring some events to Instagram. We're transferring some events to Facebook. We're transferring some of them to LinkedIn. We're moving to some platforms like Socio, for example, or Hopin, or all these things. And so when we say virtual, people just think this. And so digital was our attempt at kind of broadening that and opening that up.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
The interesting thing is that I started the events business in, I think, 1993 in the UK. And our events business in the UK, and then also the events that we organized in Europe, were much based around the idea of theatre. If you were in the room, the set would be the whole room, and the set would be the quality of the theatre play. And then when I went to the States, there was lots of pipe and drape, and there was a big screen, because the traditions for events in the States came from TV and essentially recreating a TV show that was live. So I think what this is a writing problem primarily, as well as first, and then a technical problem. It's about writing it so that this becomes a digital event, which means using, if you're going to do an Instagram event, I guess, do it in the argot of Instagram, in which you have lots of real accounts and fake accounts, and they're all telling a story, and they're all kind of doing a flow that appears in your timeline that actually is very Instagrammy or very Facebooky, so that you're creating the dramatic. Because as event planners, what we do is create, so what's the first flow that we have an event? Well, we first hear about the event, and then we eventually apply to join it, and then eventually we get a welcome pack. This is the old days. And then when we get near the airport, there may be a desk at the airport that we're leaving from associated with the event. And then when we arrive, in other words, it's creating this flow of a story and of a world that's different from your normal world. And that's about writing and branding. And that's, I think we can keep on doing when it's digital.
Well, and I do think that we really think about, you're calling it flow, the journey of the attendee is something that I think a lot of people don't, especially in digital events, they're not thinking about as much. They're like, oh, they'll register and then they'll show up. But, how do we create that experience from the moment that, and really that journey that I tend to refer to it as, we think about that as from the moment they find out about the event, what is their experience at every step, and how do we make that great? That they find out about it, that they go to read more about it, that they register, and then they get the information back that tells them what to do, and they have certainty about what that's going to be and what they need to do to be ready and what's going to happen when they get there and all those other bits and pieces. And I think that, again, that can be very different, because when I think of digital first, and when we're talking to our clients about digital first, they're going, well, what about the tables? And we're like, you can still have the tables. Like, we're not taking the tables away. You can sell the table for $10,000 a table, and you can put people in it. You can give them drinks. You can give them food. You can do all the things you want to do. It's not that we're taking away the physical experience. It is that the physical experience is the same in some ways from an experiential perspective of the plenary sessions is the same as everybody else that's happening online. So I watch the main speaker up on an LED wall. And by the way, the LED walls work way better without people standing in front of them. so that, you have a huge LED wall, and I have a speaker up there talking and doing everything, and I can make it way more interesting. I'm, that up there and make it better. I can put better sound in. I can make it tighter, all those things. It just means that person's in a studio. And so this is a giant watch party. What used to be the physical event, the core of the event, is a giant watch party. And that watch party can exist in 20, 30 places at one time. And they're all going to, and we did this in Canada where we had 4 cities. Now, in this case, we did have a stage in 2 of the cities. But what happened is that we set it all up. This is 8 years ago. So this is nothing new. But they were all, in this case, they were all connected with Hangouts. And they basically, any person at any room could stand up and talk to the speaker. Like, and just raise their hand and say, I have a question, and stand up and talk. So the two-way communication totally worked. And when we finished it, we were like, I don't know why anyone would do it any other way. Because the other thing that we have to remember that's coming is that environmental firms are already ramping up, because now that we've stopped, there are people who are going to ask companies to publish the carbon impact of their events. Like, that's coming. That's because there's going to be a hard push to stop the conference world starting back up again because of the amount of carbon that it generates, for all those people to fly in and all those people to drive and all those people to, and that is going to keep on pressing down on this idea of people don't have to leave London to attend an event that might have people in. And, at some point you get into what we call a centerless event, which is that there is no center. There's speakers in different parts of the world. There's audience in different parts of the world. Some are congregated in hundreds, some are congregated in thousands. And it doesn't have to be that there's any given center to that event. Go ahead, Maggie.
What I was going to say about when you had somebody say, what about the tables? Our response to that would be, you're thinking in person, not digitally. And so in many cases, we would actually say, ignore the tables first. Like, let's imagine this as fully digital, and then let's kind of look at the tables. Also, to your point about the carbon neutral stuff, there's already 3 companies that have like a framework and guidelines when it comes to carbon emissions for events. And a lot of the major conferences and major event consortiums, I don't know what to call them, they're already pushing this. So the framework's there. It's going to be really easy for these environmental groups to say, no way, we can already track it. So I definitely think you're right in that regard.
Yeah, it's definitely on its way. And so I think that people have to be conscious that that this is going to be a constant conversation. And for us, there is a power to having people in the room, that you get to hang out with them. You get to have that hallway experience. You get to give them dinner. You get to have them. And so that, what we're telling a lot of our clients is they don't have to give that up. They can still have that meet and greet experience, and they can actually have it all over the world. And it will be a high quality event in New York and San Francisco and London and Cape Town all at the same time. And your salespeople in that area can still have those conversations and do all those things. It's just that we're opening that possibility that anybody can watch the show from their phone, from their computer, as well as go to a location and have the extra bits. When we're working on these behind the scenes stuff for all of you, so we're kind of in the planning session right now of shooting at 3210. So we have a big stage, and there'll be some of you that want to come, come to the stage and actually watch us shoot it. And we're going to let you do that. You can hang out with the crew. You can talk to them a little bit. But when we actually go to shooting, we're going to put you in the 3210 theater, which is a really nice theater. So you get to watch it in the theater and interact like everybody else, because there'll be 100, up to 100 people that might be coming to the location, but there'll be 1,000 people that are watching online, and all of you will have that same experience during the actual shooting. But there is an advantage to coming as well. And so those are the things that, I think that when we think about it, the reason we want to do that is that I don't want anybody online to feel like they're in the kiddie table. You know, I don't want them to feel like they're a third party. I want them to all have the same experience. And I think that that's going to make this really powerful. Let's go jump into the questions, Bill.
Chris Widener of Lafayette, Indiana says, how do you convince stakeholders that Zoom is interactive and should not be used for pure talking heads?
Go ahead, Maggie.
Show them. So whenever we want to do something with a client, if that's new to them, which in a lot of cases it is, take them to Zoom, show them how it's interactive, send them to an event that you know is going to be interactive, invite them to office hours, actually show them what it is, because many of them can't actually visualize it or understand it. It's so new to them.
Yeah. And the reality is that the decks never worked. Like we were sitting in the audience. I mean, they think that they were working because we're sitting in the audience. Like the biggest problem we had when we were doing audience shots, you know, for a lot of these big events is you cut to the audience and there's someone looking down at their phone. They're looking down at their laptop. They're not paying attention. And so you had to always shoot around all of that stuff. And so it really wasn't working in the past either. You know, it's just that now it's more clear because they just leave, or they mute their camera and they just, you know, so it's clearer to you that they're not there because they're not sitting in a chair in front of you. But the reality is people were only half watching before because slide decks are really boring. Like they're really boring, you know, and they're basically not feeding what we call ADD with kids. I think oftentimes is that kids have learned how to absorb, and most of us have learned how to absorb information much faster. Now we're used to absorbing that information much faster, and people haven't sped up how they're sending the data, you know, to us. And so we fill that data in with texts and, you know, surfing Facebook and doing all those other things during the show. Go ahead, Andy.
I want to sort of push back a little bit on the slide decks are boring thing, because I think many slide decks are awful boring, and a few that people put some real thought into, and particularly people with production backgrounds, that I don't think the problem is the tool. I think the problem is how most people use the tool, and that there are times that, you know, really good illustration of something helps to make a compelling talk more compelling.
Absolutely. No. So, and what I would say is that when you take your slide deck to a point where it's almost a video show, and, you know, you're not putting text up there, you're not, you know, you're moving very fast, you're only putting things up there that need to support what you're talking about. You're absolutely right that a slide deck can be extremely powerful. I make a deck a day. So I do think that but mine will have very little text because I'm planning to talk over it, you know, and even if I send it out, I try to put the least amount of text as possible. You know, and so I think that it's just the way we use them. And if we drone on with a lot of text on those screens, it just doesn't work. And so I think that's become clear. I think that one of the things that we see over and over and over again is that you shouldn't waste people's time with the presentation. You should send that to them ahead of time, let them watch it, highlight it, and then have conversation. What we're finding here in office hours is, I mean, anytime someone does a presentation here for more than about 5 or 6 minutes, I can watch everybody's eyes go away. I just watch the panel, just kind of, they're all looking down, they're all looking at something else. They're just waiting. They're waiting for us, whoever's talking, to stop talking so that we can start actually conversing, you know. And I think that is the future, is going to be lots and lots of conversation. Go ahead, Sky, and then Jeffrey.
Well, to your point of retention and engagement, Roscoe probably has the better clarification of the educational pyramid of if you're just being told something, you have a certain amount of retention. If you're told and actively participating in something, you retain it even deeper. If you're actively participating in the conversation, you really own whatever the conversation is about. And to your point, I realize as you're talking, I've been to many conferences and we're all looking at the iMac and we're all looking at the big giant screen anyway. So I like the yes and of your having the small intimate opportunities at the tables, but we're all still going to be looking at big screens anyway. So why not embrace it and move forward intentionally?
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing, is that the experience, the iMac experience will be better from a studio than from the stage. Like that's you know, when I'm in a studio, I'm able to control, or from someone's house. Like I would rather, the only live presentation I've done, I used to do them all the time at NAB and IBC and other things. And I finally just stopped. I started going to some of the events. I went to an educational event where they wanted me to come in, and I said, you know, I was just coming from my office because I can do this, right, all the time, right, from my office. And so I can And I was like, I'm not like, I can't do that easily at your facility. Why don't I just come in over Skype? And they were like, oh, we really want you to be there. And I'm like, you don't really want me to be there. Like, I know you think you do, but I can do a lot more from my office than I can from the stage. And so a studio, a well-equipped studio that is built for presentations. It's not a broadcast studio. It is truly a presentation studio, has an enormous power to engage with the audience remotely. And I think that that's a new generation of studio that is that we built for some of our stuff that doesn't exist in the real world in very many places. Go ahead, Jeffrey, or if at all.
Yeah, on the slide decks things, for me, I do a lot of them because a lot of the video that I produce is in enterprise technology, and they got some slide decks that are some pains that are just a pain for that matter. But for me, it's all about how you switch it in and switch it out. I tell them when I start anything, I'll tell them, always expect to be on camera because you're probably going to be on camera. You don't even know it. And then I'm going to switch between that deck to the person, maybe a different angle. If I have something that has multiple angles to it, I'm always within 30 seconds moving from one to the next to keep people involved in what's going on.
Yep. Next question.
Andy Dolph from Durham, New Hampshire has a couple in here. The first one of which is, when producing digital first or fully remote events, how do we give presenters or performers the experience of the energy of being in the room with a live audience?
Go ahead, Liberty.
Part of that we found is doing a walkthrough beforehand. And even though they're not live yet, but when they see some of the assets that we create, whether those be some of the promo videos, and making sure that once we actually walking them through the experience first so that they can get excited, so that once they are actually in the room, they see the chat going up. And we're very careful because we don't want them to be distracted as well. But it's really hand holding and helping walking them through that to get them comfortable. Because some folks, it will be, they're still looking at, okay, it didn't happen last year. How is it going to happen? So just having those assets and really focusing on experience has been what's worked for us.
Yeah, go ahead, Alex. Oh, you're right.
Maybe it would be a good idea to set up hashtags or tags of some sort, so people to encourage conversation before a specific part of the show starts, so that if you've got a contributor, they can see there's always been a little bit of conversation around that topic already, and that a mini community is just waiting to be born by what you're about to the story you're about to tell. And you may realize that the level of conversation may be different from what you're expecting from that little bit of the pre-show. Just, oh, they seem to be talking about this, or they've got more questions about that. It actually may make the presenter realize that they could cover to slant their presentation a certain way based on this audience, and also so the conversation may be directed in a different way for the later part of their session or something like that. So that will actually, what is the energy of your room and what does it actually give a presenter? We actually give them more with digital than we can in this case, because in the case of digital, we actually have an idea of which parts they have interest in, maybe a mini micro survey or something like that just before they start. The kind of thing that some presenters do anyway at the beginning of sessions, but instead of them having to arrange all that, this could be done by the people organizing things, so that people presenting go, oh, the energy of these people who are actually here is this. So actually realizing they're a responsive person to that.
The hard part is really also just the function of presenting your material before you even see your audience is, so when I present, and this is the way I've done it for the last 20 years, so this is nothing new for me, is that I get up there, I've got a bunch of examples I want to show you that's in a deck. The deck is just a container for videos and stills that I want to show to talk about certain concepts. I then have a conversation with the audience. Like, that's the way, if anyone's ever seen my NAB talks, it's just me talking like, okay. And I tell people at the very beginning, I'm not very good at speaking. I'm just really good at answering questions. That's why office hours, this is this way. And so then people just jump in and we start talking, and I get through most of the slides, but I don't have any way of how I'm going to, I just follow the audience around. Now in my head, I know I have to get to that point. I have to get to this point, but the structure of it is different. And I think that, again, like when I think about this, of where this is going, is we think about the event, being here, this is on a certain day, but we should be sending them the videos over here. We should have a conversation that goes on that builds up to this event. And then we can continue to have a conversation. This is a tent pole that kind of runs our event, but it's not a, it isn't, the presentation itself can be listened to before the event. It can be viewed ahead of time. It can be absorbed because people are much more ready to have that conversation with you and ask questions and everything else. And that's what you're going to see us moving towards here, where starting in April, you're going to start seeing links that go in. So when you see that breakdown in the morning that says, this is what we're talking about on Monday, it'll be like, here's your reading materials, like here's the place to go on YouTube. And here's, like, we won't build them all, but we'll send you places to read it, because I bet you our conversations will be 5 times deeper than they were before, because you have a bunch of stuff building up, and we'll be talking about it in Discord, and we'll be talking about it somewhere else. And so there'll be kind of a build up of Q&A and discussion. And I think that's where the events, kind of morph. Go ahead, Mickey, and then Alex.
Yeah, and possibly like a more literal solution to having the performers feel the room is to, depending on what type of event it is and what type of audience it brings in, is to send them a room mic feed or a crowd mic feed into their IFBs, even if they're remote, and they can get the sense of, if the crowd is cheering, or if they're in the middle of an applause.
Go ahead, Alex.
I think the idea is we have to also deal with people as they are who contribute to events, whether they're good at contributing to events or not. You have programmers who are Cisco people at Cisco having to talk to 10,000 people who are Cisco developers or Apple or whatever. It's more about leading them by the hand to say what the session is for and what it's about, and how to actually build into what they're good at, and try not for them to do things they're not so great at. But part of that is saying the old principle of what cause do you want to affect by this presentation? And they're very different sessions, or not presentation, or sessions, or conversations. And I suppose it's the organizers can say what we're good at is helping people with that. Now, of course, that's very hard with executives, because they're supposedly good at this, but they're not. So that's quite hard too when you're talking about corporate stuff.
Well, and I think that many of these folks it's easier for them to answer questions than to do a long presentation. So for many of these folks, like trying to figure out what they have to say exactly and how to say it and everything else is much harder for them than if someone just asks, like I don't want to give a speech for 45 minutes at NAB. I don't want to walk through all this stuff. That's boring. I'm bored by the end of it. And so I just want to have a conversation. And I think that a lot of folks can do that. Now, of course, some people are afraid of what they'll say, and legal and forward viewing statements or all that other stuff. So there are reasons why you can't always do that, but that's even a better reason just to package it up in a video. I mean, if we look at what Frame.io did, it's the best keynote ever, and it doesn't look like a stage, and it doesn't feel like it. They just cut a movie. Like, let's just watch a movie and then we can answer questions. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I love what Tony Robbins did at the beginning of the pandemic, where he's so used to being in front of that audience that he felt he needed to have them there. And so he did. And what he's magical at is pulling people in. So he'll say, Sarah in the blue sweater, and that just lights people up. I mean, we saw it here today with Tony and singing happy birthday. I mean, I watched the physiology of the whole panel just completely change. So, I mean, pulling people in and really being interactive, I think, is key. So you got to acknowledge and bring in that audience. And so this is one way, by getting these big screens and sticking them in front. You can see that he's got a confidence monitor below, and he's still got his run a show down below, comfort monitor, as you would probably call it in Europe there, Alex. But yeah, you can see that this is the future. I mean, being able to see your people and then pull them in.
And then he went and made that a really, really big version of that. So he's, with thousands of people on that screen. I don't know if you need thousands. I think that for me, on a Zoom screen, I'd rather have 300 that I can see well than 1,000 that are just tiny little squares. So that's kind of in my world. But I do think that we have to figure out ways that we can cross there you go. There's the bigger screen that he has. And even then, I think that that's good. I think it's a dense, and I couldn't do this show. We couldn't do this show without the screens. Like, it just wouldn't work. Like, we're responding all the time, and we're looking at who's raising their hand. We're looking at how that works. So I think that, having those confidence monitors and having something for someone to look at, I think that's part of the next generation of these events, is being able to see a group of people but those group of people can be, some of them can be coming in individually. Some of them are represent rooms of people, starting in, I mean, the reason that I built tools that do this kind of thing is because I was teaching in Rwanda from my house in San Francisco. And so I'm on 2 screens down there. One is my screen that I'm actually talking to, and the other one is me. And then I have the students, that's 20 people. That's just 20, but it could have been 200. It could have been 2,000. It could have been whatever. But I'm able to sit there comfortably talking about it to anyone in the world. And I think that that's where the power of digital first really starts to come through. Next question.
Andy Dolph has a second one, and he is asking about the hallway experience. How are folks creating that for fully remote events where everybody's joining from home?
Go ahead, Alex.
I saw an event being promoted, which is to do with, I don't know, post-production or something like that, or the future of digital production partnership and that kind of thing. And they put the times in your PST, because that's where the event is being hosted, but also in your local time zone. But they do hallway conversations, and they schedule the hallway conversations before the main session starts at the beginning of the day. And sometimes they put quite silly things in there, saying your favorite dog, or bring your dog into the conversation, to make it deliberately, obviously informal, and to actually schedule the nature of the not professional conversation in order so that it is more like scheduled icebreakers. So it's not quite what you're talking about, but it's an interesting thing to put in the schedule to consider whether should I go to that event? Oh, it looks like they're actually considered how to engender, how to encourage conversations before the sessions, during quote coffee breaks, and also during times when you should go to the virtual stands of the exhibitions and the booths and stuff like that. So people are starting to do that a little bit.
Well, and our post show has become that in a lot of ways, where the post show on Saturday runs for hours, like 6-8 hours long, and there's like 4 or 5 rooms, and there's a random smattering of people in these different rooms. And I walk in, I listen to it, I just leave it on my HomePod, and I'm working and doing things, and I'm listening to it, and sometimes it's silent for a while, and then suddenly someone comes in, they start talking, and it feels very much, except we're connected all over the world. Like there's people talking from all, in 2 or 3 different continents, having a hallway conversation. Go ahead, Maggie.
So a couple things that we've done is similar to the way we use Discord for office hours. We've done that with Slack or Discord. So we just did a 800-person student developer conference. And now we have this Discord of 800 people from around the world that the client's actually going to use long-term to build community, to, sell other products and all this. We've also scheduled lunchtime hangouts, and we bring like a cheerleader on for those. So we bring somebody who's like friendly and excited. And so if it's only one person, you get to hang out with that one person and you feel good about it. And that kind of builds a community over time when people feel comfortable going. So unfortunately, you have to schedule all this stuff. It's not as casual as like when you're going to grab a coffee, but Discord and scheduling these kind of breakout sessions with some of these platforms really does work.
And it's one of those things that you when you start doing it over and over again, like the thing that we are going to lose, I think, eventually is these. I mean, there will be big events. It's not that, but there won't be as many, because what people are learning really quickly is that, if I do lots of events, I start building that community and I start having more of that. So like what works about what we do is that we do it every day. We've got a Discord that has 1,000 people in it. We've got the pre-show and the post-show, and we have other things to hang out with. And then people start building their own stuff after that. And so, and again, I think we have a very unique community that has built up around this because we do it all the time. But I think that other people can do the same thing, which is that they're doing, more and more. When we start, as we start to increase the intensity of our second hours, I'm already getting texts and emails of like, this is I don't know if I want to go back to NAB if you guys keep on really covering a wide enough gamut of what's going on, because I can do it every day, and it's just a much better thing than walking around all the time. And that's the thing that's starting to happen. Jeffrey, and then John, and then Sky.
I'm part of a panel on a different production. Last week we had a series of interviews with different companies dealing in networking, and what they did was they basically had their main panel going into the live stream, where we could ask questions while they're presenting on a very limited basis. But after that presentation happens, we all got then shuttled to another Zoom, where we got put into a room and where we could ask more detailed questions. We could get out of that room to do one-on-ones with anybody, record anything if we need to, and then get back and gather from there. So it worked really well. I liked and didn't like the fact that we were shuttled from Zoom to Zoom. Didn't like it because of the fact that we had to close one out to open another, but liked it because of the fact we had to do that. So it's kind of that double-edged sword there.
Go ahead, John.
So using OAuth and other methods of gathering data, there's going to be some amazing AI matching systems available for these conferences that you could never do in a physical realm. And that's what we're really excited about, is these matching algorithms to match people up and find similar interests, et cetera. And we also do parties after the normal conference. We have singers and dancers and, you know, orchestral performances, all that kind of stuff. And people love that stuff.
Go ahead, Sky.
I'm really interested in this retention concept, and I looked up that pyramid, education of learning pyramid, and I posted it in Mukana. But it's the differentiation is the passive versus the participatory. And then as you participate, the retention level just accelerates exponentially. And if that's what you want to really, you know, if your message is important enough, or if you're just there to entertain, I think is the option. And Alex, to your point of the flow, it reminds me of watching the NFL. At a football game, they schedule that 2-hour event or a 3-hour event. Now they don't know what's going to happen inside of those, you know, the passes and the throws, but those commercials are scheduled. Those previs things are going to happen. And so to intentionally create, as Alex says, a nutrient-rich environment for retention of your information. How do we? I love this. Getting people involved opportunity is awesome.
Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, we talked about it before with Hopin having this networking portion of the event where it does feel like you're in the hallway, or I bring it akin to being in line to grab a water or something, and you start talking to the person behind you or in front of you, and you strike up a conversation. Next thing you know, like, oh, you're doing that, and you just meet somebody. Another one that Ari Block showed me is Air Meet, and what fascinated me with this one is it's probably dark to see, but there's a table here with 4 seats, and you can see who's at the table, and you can hit join, and then it's like a virtual table. So now you got 4 people instead of just the one-on-one. So that's another one to take a look at, Andy, is Air Meet, and then hop in if you want the more one-on-one experience.
Those are, and it just depends on the user as well. Like getting thrown into small groups to me is like a little version of hell. So I, you know, like it's just, you know, so, you know, I just want things to be kind of organic, you know, like where it's just like, I'm going to a room and I'm interested in it and I can hang out. And if I want to start participating, I can, and I can sit in the back if I don't want to interact. And so, and I think that, so I think it depends on, again, the kind of person that's doing it. And again, office hours is one expression of that. And it's mostly based around my own proclivities of I hate being forced into a box where I suddenly have to interact with someone that I don't know. like I don't like I you know, like I'm fine with that it happening organically. I'm not fine with just being stuck into it, you know, and so I've, you know, it's part of why I don't go to a lot of things like that. It's just like that just doesn't all that, like the reason I don't go to things like Tony Robbins' thing is paired sharing. like that is that type of event. I don't know if Tony Robbins does that, but those types of events oftentimes do this thing where they go, okay, now talk amongst, you know, like pair up with your neighbor and start talking to them. I'm like, I don't want to do that at all. You know, like, you know, so anyway, Alex.
I like how on Clubhouse they have something like leave quietly, so that when you leave a group of people, you don't have to make a big deal of it. I think it's coming up with these social things that actually much more than the digital, that writing part in which you kind of join quietly, the bit where you sidle up to a group of people and you have a feeling the conversation may be interesting and they see that you're there, but it's actually okay for you to be there and you can sidle away without saying anything. So it's about engineering that kind of thing and then finding the platform that can do it, maybe, depending on the event, because some people will need to be encouraged to learn more.
And again, I think that where we're going with a lot of these digital events eventually, because the digital events, when we have the infrastructure set up, are a lot less expensive to execute, is lots of little events, and then we might have a yearly event, we might have a big event, we might have all those other things, but there's lots of little events, and those hallway things get sorted out because we're constantly interacting with each other, not like, oh, we have to figure it all out while we're in this one space. The reason we had to do that before was because we were constrained by time and space. We were constrained by, we're all here at this moment. We all, can only see each other in this area. That's something that doesn't exist now. We can do this anytime we want, and that is a paradigm shift that people haven't gotten their head around when they think about events right now, in my opinion, is that there's a reason to do really large ones where we're all going to get together and talk, but there's also, this ongoing one where there's a couple hundred people talking every day, like we do here, Alex.
So I suppose the interesting thing is to what is the bandwidth of the people attending and the people who don't have much time. Or say if you are talking about somebody at Cisco who is an engineer working on an aspect of the Cisco operating system for routers and stuff like that. Now, there are events that happen every year and they are scheduled annually, not because it's just easier to organize stuff like that, but eventually things will be able to be scheduled in such a way like, oh, we seem to have enough content now, so that we know in 3 months' time there'll be enough content to have an event. So in 3 months' time, we're going to have an event, and we're just going to pick around a day just like that, because we can. Yeah. There's no venue or anything like that. There's no the resources there to have an event when we're ready, because annual is just convenient for organizers, and that doesn't apply. But then there's the events within the events, because it's a bit like saying, say I'm with Apple and I'm doing kernel drivers or something like that. Now you are actually effectively creating a little kernel driver community as the person presenting that stuff. But Apple are telling you, as the engineer, you have this amount of bandwidth. We want you to work for Apple on this. And the community building part is a certain percentage of your time, 3%, 10%, 50%, depending if you're a marketing person. And then creating events that are factored into that community aspect of maintaining that as part of your role at a company like Apple or Cisco.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing is that eventually companies are going to realize that it's all about the community. It's about building a ongoing community that you're constantly interacting with, not just doing a launch event. Next question.
Moving to Roscoe Jones, cameras in back can use long lenses to get you closer to the action. Is the audience then a distraction, or might they add a level of excitement? And he notes Disney has used their clean-cut employees for years as a stand-in audience for their specials.
I mean, it definitely adds something to it. The question is that can you reproduce some of that just by doing the kind of things like putting them on screens as opposed to putting them in the room? The problem is that the eye contact goes away immediately. Like it just goes away. They're never going to be looking at you, the audience. As soon as you put a couple of people, like when we put up point-to-points where we're putting an executive who's going to go into another location, one of the big rules that we have is lots of duvetine or so we tent away everything in front of them so that the only thing that they can see, the only thing in their periphery all the way around is the screens, so that keeps their eyes looking straight at the audience so they don't start going like this, and looking over at somebody walking or anything else, because we are so driven as human beings to look at that unless you're extremely well trained. I mean, that's part of what makes actors so amazing, is they can have these intimate moments with the camera or intimate moments with each other while there's 60 people around them, but that's not normal. The normal person can't do that. They just are constantly looking at everyone around them, and they're looking at the audience, and there is this arresting thing. This is why Errol Morris, created the Interrotron, is there's this arresting thing when people look right at you. And the more I do those kinds, we've been doing Interrotron for 15 years now because Salesforce really liked it a long time ago. And you get used to people looking straight at you while they're talking. And this whole idea of like even interviews for documentaries where everyone's looking off to the side like this gets really like, oh, it's really kind of old. An old way to do that. And so I think that it's that personal feel that you get when someone's looking right at you that you don't get when you're sitting in the back. But I do think it adds energy, and I think that there's some people that need it. But I think that that's not because it has to be that way. It's just that's a limitation of their personality at the moment. Next question.
John Idelson in Monterey and here on the panel says, what's the best way to present today's discussion in front of conference planners? When working with our planners, they think some of our ideas are wild ideas from the tech guy.
Go ahead, Maggie.
I think, again, going back to the Zoom question, like just show them. Like, so I just did a basically a demo with the audiovisual company where we jumped on a Zoom call and they showed me all that they're capable of doing. Sometimes as conference or event planners, it's hard for us to visualize what you're saying because you're all in the weeds. You understand all the technical details and it's over our heads in some capacity. And we're trying to, do all the other pieces. So if you can actually show us what you're trying to say, it's super helpful and you'll likely get us on board, especially if it's super cool.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, we had a number of events, and the planners who go to our facility, and I'm advising the city facility, they had been shown a lot of these, let's make it look like a virtual exhibit hall. Let's do, these sort of quasi interactive events. And they seem to listen to those because they feel more comfortable with that. And that's been the challenge. This is a big leap for them.
Also, someone spent a lot of money on those visualizations. I mean, I think that one of the things that, I'm noodling away with right now is building like graphics that can show me in my presentations are pretty good and I'm pretty good at describing them to clients. But the next step is really building out really great illustrations that I can use in slide decks of going, this is what this would look like. And this is how it would work. And you have to get through, there's, I talk about this a lot, but action equals possibility is greater than circumstance. That is the equation that is E equals MC squared of getting people to do things. Is that they will do something when the possibility is greater than the circumstance. And so you either increase the possibility or you decrease the circumstance. So decreasing the circumstance for me is saying, hey, you can still have your room. You can still have your little food and the things and everything else. That's moving the circumstance down, because that was a big circumstance of like, we can't have people in the room. That's not going to work. So you move that down. So you still have that. And we just put the people. And what's funny is that a digital first event with a studio is no more expensive than doing it in the room, because it's actually oftentimes less expensive, because the dealing with the cameras in the room and all the other stuff is actually the same or more than putting someone in a smaller studio and then piping it into an iMac. Go ahead, Sky.
So Maggie, would you rather prefer have somebody show you an end product, or would you rather be a participant in the process of what the cables and the wires, and you don't have time for that oftentimes. So you want an example, to Alex's point, of this is what it could look like. And then the supporting information would be the ROI. What makes it good for you? What makes it simple for you? What makes you money? Or makes you look better for the next job?
And the easiest thing to do is to really think about how do we show an example? I mean, office hours is my version of, let me just show you how this works and let's figure this out together and let people see it, because there's a lot more people in this group thinking this way because we do it every day, and we're in the middle of it and we see that it works. And what we have to do as a group is do more events where, and I'm going to invite you guys to do this at some point, not in a too distant future, of, hey, let's go build an event together and let's just do it and show people what this could look like and how far it could go. But a demo goes a long way in showing people what that is. And a 10-minute version or a 20-minute version of a video that it illustrates it is more powerful than any description that we can give it. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then Maggie, and then John.
3 minutes.
One thing that I would do is because we did it in this last event, before the event, we got a swag box, we got a snack box, and then we got a card to whatever service that we use to get food in for lunches and stuff like that. So maybe have like a snack box that gets delivered to their door and a food card that they can use to order their own lunch before the event, so they can see how that part of the thing would work if they offer it in the actual event itself.
Go ahead, John. I think John was next.
Well, it's just saying, we try to do a demonstration where I showed them office hours and we talked about the swag boxes, and the conference planner said, this would not work for 250 state procurement officers. We need something for that sort of group. She said they weren't disciplined enough for the office hours, and the swag box would scare purchasing agents. So,
well, and one of the things there though is that this is why instead of doing a big event, this is why doing lots and lots of small events slowly trains the audience to do that. Like, we didn't start this way. I mean, we now have a really great, layout of how this works, but we didn't start that way. We figured it out. Go ahead, Maggie. Did you have?
Yeah, my point was just going to be to what Sky was saying is like, I have to advocate for you. So I'm an independent planner. So I'm going to my clients to advocate for you. Somebody who's internal, which I was many moons ago, they still have to advocate for you. So don't just show me, give me something that I can show off and make the pricing clear. So we've had so many problems where people have been like, oh, it's roughly 5,000 to 25,000. It's like, well, I can't budget for that. Like, give me information about what all that means. And then I can advocate on your behalf.
And that's why when I say I build a deck a day, I'm building a deck for somebody to advocate that. And that's their support deck, and it's custom to them. Every single one of them is built like, this is what this looks like, and this is how it's going to work, and this is what it's going to do. And this is all the way down to the new interface changes we're going to make in Mukana for them, and how that's going to be, and all the infrastructure. And I lay all that out for them because they're not going to be able to figure that out. Like, I'm the one that can draw that out for them so that they can then hand it out in meetings and so on and so forth. So you're absolutely right that's a key skill. And this is why I always say that Keynote makes more money for me than any other piece of software in the world. Next question. We're running out of time.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago says, the events you're talking about seem to imply a level of engagement that is wanted. In your mind, how would this type of event be passively consumed?
Go ahead, Maggie.
I feel like I'm answering all the questions, so don't choose me if you want.
We'll love it.
But much like Office Hours does, we send almost every event that we do to YouTube so that if people want to Chromecast it and just sit on their couch and like not engage at all, that's an option. Because we have to remember people are at home with children, they're at home working, they're on their computer all day. So we do want a way that if people want to engage on a passive way, as you say, that they have that option.
The vast majority of people that experience Office Hours are enjoying it passively. They're listening to it. They're not asking questions. They're either logged in here, or they're on YouTube, or they watch it later. So it's still valid. Next question.
Tony Mobley, a panelist from Newman, says, is there a digital first conversation for education that can be had before all the funds are spent?
That's probably a good one for the future of education conversation on Saturday. But I think that, the fundamentally, I mean, I've said it before, is that there's, between the last one and this next push of funding, there's $130 billion being spent, and, it would cost $20 billion to give every single teacher in K through 12 a $5,000 kit. Like, you could literally give them a platform that they could teach. And if they had that platform, they would never want to go back to the classroom. The reason that they want to go back to the classroom is because they have horrible little webcams and no background and bad whatever. If they had what I have sitting in front of me, they would never want it. It's so much faster and easier. And if all the students got little kits so that it was now clean audio and they had a little background behind them and everything else. If we spent the money that way, we'd be ready for the future. Instead, we're going to spend it on plexiglass most likely and wipes. Roscoe.
Yeah. Is there a conversation that could be had? Yes. Is the conversation going on? I'd say no.
No, too much old thinking. Next question.
Andy Dolph again from Durham says, Alex, how do you define a presentation studio versus a broadcast studio?
So, and I'll show more and more of it. I showed the Telestrator on this last one. I'm going to show more and more of it as I finish up the new build for it. I keep on tearing my system apart because we run out of gear for our own shows, but I'm now kind of buying all the stuff that I need to keep it in one place. The presentation studio is designed to have a conversation with the audience. It is not designed to talk to them. It's designed to have a conversation, which means that it is going to put the audience in front of you. You are going to be able to have two-way conversations, whether someone's coming in over their individual computer or from a room or whatever, you can have a conversation. And most importantly, it provides the speaker the ability to have a nonlinear conversation about the content. And that is something that broadcast studios just don't do very well. They don't have a way to have a whiteboard to draw on. They can't, it's not easy for them to do, I'm doing this and I'm going over here. And there's, this thing, there's a piece of glass, I guess, that does this, but this Wacom tablet does it really well. And so, what I can do here is I can draw on things, but I can draw on anything that I put through this piece. And when I get an extreme here, I'll have a whole bunch of inputs that I'm able to tap through. Those are multiple camera inputs. Those are playbacks. Those are whiteboards. Those are all these things. I have a bunch of information. I can switch between my Keynote slide. My Keynote slides, I can switch between examples, live cameras, all those things, and I can draw over everything, and I can interact with the audience. I can even take their feed. If someone's somewhere and they want to show me something, I can take their feed, draw on it, and send it back to them. And so all of those things you're building a studio that is built to interact, and it's also built to have any number of other studios connected to it and any number of other individuals connected to it as presenters. So when you start building this next generation of studio, you're building them so that they automatically link in. I mean, well, the funny thing about it is this is a business plan that I wrote when my last company was trying to figure out what to do next and trying to sell. We were like, we could build this huge network of all these virtual studios that are all designed for this. And so the idea is that you build them all out, because what you want to be able to do is walk into WeWork and have one, or whatever the new WeWork is. So there is a studio there that's designed to connect to everyone else. And that is possible now, not even that expensive. And you could build, hundreds of these little studios and then a couple big ones. And the thing is that now you have this kind of, again, centerless system that allows people to interact with each other. But it is the fundamental challenge of the next generation of studio is really powerfully bridging analog to digital. Like, how do we take an analog, what we want to do with our hands, and bridge it into the digital realm and make it available to everyone? Next question.
And it's oh no, we got one more that slipped in late. Marty Adius has the second to last from Silver Spring, Maryland, with how can I sign up for the Office Hours International Digital First Events Network, where we spec out and equip and staff local clubs and theaters as event studios?
Coming soon. Next question.
And the last one comes from Sacramento and Eddie Martinez, who says, how does or can sponsorship be worked into digital first events?
Yeah, go ahead, Maggie.
So we've been finding that sponsorship has obviously been all over the map because COVID and money is like super weird right now, but we have been finding that we work primarily in the tech and innovation space. And so a bunch of our clients actually prefer the digital first sponsorship benefits because they're actually getting more FaceTime, for lack of a better word, but they're ending up on Instagram, which is where we're engaging highly. They're ending up in these Discord channels and these Slack channels so they can private message people. It seems more casual to them. What you'll want to do when you're deciding what sponsorship benefits are is looking first at the platform you're going to use and identifying where are high visibility spots, and then ways that they can actually engage within the content itself. So you should, in a conference, for example, you might want to hold like a couple slots that can have sponsor talks, but that, it's one of many videos. Like Alex has said, you give a bunch of videos and then they can do a Q&A talk. There are some people who it's like a no-go though. They want face-to-face, and that's more their problem, that they haven't figured out how to do sales in a digital first space. It's not the event's fault. And
the issue really is they're not investing. One of the hard parts we have with some digital partners, they don't want to invest the hardware and to make themselves look good. Even though they were going to spend $100,000 on a booth, they don't want to spend $1,000 on their camera setup. Whereas when you think about especially now with the Extremes, but even with the ATEM Minis, when you think about, if I built an expo that had X number of exhibitors and people could go to them, but you could walk into these breakout rooms, let's say, and instead of having you say the same thing, and I've been a demo artist at conferences, you're basically answering 4 questions over and over and over again. How do I get to this? And show me the new features. And, there's like a handful of questions that you just get good at answering. Now, why am I not answering that all at one time? Because in a booth, I can only get 10 people or 20 people. If I have an amplification, I can get 50 people. But online, I can do the talk of what the new, if Adobe could have Stu Maschwitz come up and do his thing. And when he does his thing at IBC, there was 75 people sitting in the little Adobe theater. With Stu, it should be 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 that all get to see it, and it's done. And they're all there to see that breakdown. And so the thing is that what the folks haven't realized is how much more scalable it is when you're able to do that. Like, it can be this massive number of people on the other end rather than the handful of people that you were dealing with at that moment. And then you break out. You say, well, contact me and we can talk more face to face and fill in all those little gaps that we didn't fill in. But you want to really think about, whether it's school or events or whatever, in the plenary session, how do we handle most of people's questions all at the same time, and then break out into smaller groups to keep on talking. Go ahead, Maggie.
The other thing I was going to say, and Liberty's making some great points in Mukana over here, but ROI is easier to identify in a digital first world because the analytics that we can snag are like way more concrete than a lot of the stuff we're able to grab at in-person events.
Right. You actually know more about who's did what and what they're doing and what kind of interaction and so on and so forth. Now, Liberty, you're putting stuff in Mukana, but you're not raising your hand. We're expecting to talk. You got a mic there. You got to.
That is so true. But we're at the end, so thank you so much, Maggie. I was just saying that's the thing. That's all this engagement happening here. But yeah, the ROI aspect, and we've done some college fairs. So when people are looking for talent, like that's a great example of sponsorship because we've got the community here. And if you think about that, being able to get people in front of their exact target, like it's actually easier now because of where we are.
I mean, it's easier now because now you have all these people that are interested in your product that are not constrained by having to fly. They're not constrained by having to set up time. You're not competing with a bunch of other things that, you can spread an event out, over a longer period of time where you don't have to compete with those things. And so I think that those are the things that are, to your point, Liberty, that it's just much easier. You can get to more people faster for less money. Go ahead. On everybody's side, it's not just on your side. It's on everybody's flight side and their hotels and their meals and all that stuff, greatly gets reduced. Carbon footprint, all those things get reduced when we let them do it from home or even just from their home city. Sky and then Alex.
Chris Fenwick introduced me to a concept called affinity group. And Maggie and Liberty, I hear this topic that you are very familiar with and you have an affinity for. And so that you showed up for this and that microphones and cameras and cables and as Chris says, the alphabet of things that we do to put stuff together, NDIs, et cetera. So I'm just, I'm very excited to hear your conversations because it puts all of this to this tech geek stuff to active use. And so just thank you for being here. Please come back.
Well, I think that we're going to be a little bit organized in March around a lot of these conversations. So the rest of March, we're going to be talking about event structure and so on and so forth. So this is just the beginning of this conversation. So hopefully we'll be able to pull Liberty and Maggie back into the conversation around, that process and work with them on that. So it would be great. But in April, I hope to start bringing some more musical artists in that we have in the past but we'll keep on having the event conversation as well. But I think we're going to do more about events and conferences and so on and so forth in March for Thursdays. So that's kind of hopefully we'll get you guys back. Go ahead, Alex.
I suppose maybe we can start classifying things and do how we do solutions for different kinds of clients. In terms, you have the internal community structure part of an organization. Like say, I used to do events for Unilever, and they used to have it so that the annual event is for a thing that the top quote unquote 200 people were allowed to go to, and now that's become a thing in which everyone can watch it live throughout the whole organization if they can spare the 45 minutes to actually see the event, as opposed to someone going somewhere on the planet for 2 days, which is completely different from an event where you don't want everyone in the world doing it, and you actually use gating functions to stop people attending because of the extra energy it takes to serve them. It depends on what you're serving them. But then you can use sponsors to pay. So you could say, hey, students, do you want to come to an event that usually costs $50? Well, Adobe are paying for you to attend to this thing, and they're paying for your attendance. And Adobe get a specific number of students that they're going to be paying for. And then you that's quite a different kind of event and structure that we could be talking about in different days.
And one of the things that, so we're working on we're bidding out a project in 2022 that is, it's going to happen in probably 15 or 20 cities. And a couple of the cities have a couple hundred people, a couple of the cities have 50 people. These are all really high value targets. Like they are, I don't, it's probably not a good term for that, but they're the folks that are the whales that are bringing in lots of money to the organization. And they're going to get wined and dined. They're going to have beautiful lighting and, all the stuff that they want, and all the food and they're going to have wine tastings and everything else. But all the plenary sessions will all be broadcast into those rooms, but then they'll also be sent out so anybody online can watch the content. The content isn't the thing, right? The thing for them is the fact that they get to have these kind of closed sessions, but those sessions are not, the content itself is being sent to everyone. All the extra stuff is the stuff that the more important, you know, or the more people who are spending more money are getting out of the deal, is the place that they can go to the Ritz and watch it in, you know, in Half Moon Bay, and they can go to, you know, these really nice places and hang out, and everything's paid for and everything else. But the speakers will not be in any of those locations. They'll be coming out of studios, you know, and going out to all of those locations at one time. So they're all on the same page. And so I think that's the kind of thing that we're going to see more and more of in that process. All right. We've gone over by 10 minutes. Thanks again for all the new folks. I think that Andy, we haven't seen very much of you. We hope to have you back. Liberty and Maggie, we hope to have you back. It was great to have you join us. So thanks so much. We'll be talking more about events on Thursdays. A reminder that tomorrow we'll be talking about CDNs, which are kind of connected, and then we'll do the same kind of talk we had today, but about education on the second hour of education on Saturday, before we start talking about the remotes. All right, we're going to jump into the post show. Thanks, everybody.